Monsieur le Commissaire, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first event in the Forum Constitutionis Europae in this spring term 2015. I have the great honor to welcome specifically the member of the European Commission responsible for economic and financial affairs, taxation and customs, Pierre Moscovici. Dear Commissioner, since 2014, the new Commission was established. You have perhaps the most important, but also the most challenging portfolio of the Commission. We know that it is not an easy task, given the continuing financial crisis in the European Union. This is why we particularly appreciate that you have taken your time and decided to honor our invitation to Berlin for sharing your views and visions on the economic and political challenges for Europe. That's a very broad subject. A few days ago, you were expected to talk at a conference which was held in the German Ministry of Economics, yet the Greek problem got priority, and you had to excuse. We are most happy that our friends in the south of Europe allowed you to come here today. Does it mean that the Greek problem is solved? Of course not. Football fans in Germany know and say, nach dem Spiel ist vor dem Spiel. After the game is before the game. Alas, Greece is not a game, by no means. Kids in Greece, a good friend and a former judge here in Berlin who lives now in Athens, just told me yesterday. Kids in Greece come to school with not having had breakfast in the morning. Some faint for atony. The health system in Greece is broken down. No pay, no care. Unemployment at its highest. People have nothing to eat, nothing to live. I could continue. The situation is untenable. There is no trust in Greek institutions. Why should anybody invest there? Rich Greeks prefer investing in Berlin. Even if we are striving to keep Greece in the euro, soon there will be no euro be left in Greece. All the money is going out. Ladies and gentlemen, the economic challenges ahead are also political challenges. This is why we will discuss at a time both of them. We see problems across Europe. The spreads of economic success in the EU member states have they ever been larger than today? This is not how I understand convergence of the economies of the member states. And the spreads among the need for Europe and the political will and support of Europe also are widening. And as are the spreads between the north and the south of the European Union. Here is a political problem we have never seen before in the EU. Why do our old and new instruments for keeping the euro and the EU together remain ineffective? While Germany benefits from the crisis and has not seen a similar positive development since decades, others suffer in an unacceptable manner. What is wrong? And yet, Germans complain about risks that we might have to be compelled to contribute to the recovery of the regions in crisis. And as this was not our crisis too, the solution seems to be our court in Karlsruhe with the OMT. What is wrong? Ladies and gentlemen, it's not my job here to give answers. We expect answers from Europe and it is Pierre Moscovici, who is here to share with us his views and visions. Let me explain why there is no more qualified person for discussing these difficult questions with us than Pierre Moscovici. He has a master's degree in economics and in political science, and also is a postgraduate in economics and in philosophy. So he has all qualifications needed. But more than this, he is a graduate of the most famous French elite school, the ENA, the École Nationale d'Administration. That means a lot. Before being appointed as a member of the EU Commission, Pierre Moscovici served from 2008 to 2014 as a member of the French National Assembly, in 2014 as the Minister for Economy and Finance in France, 2007 to 2012 as a Vice President and member of the European Parliament, what you have already been in an earlier period from 1997 to 2002. Then from 2004 to 2007, he represented the French government in this very important constitutional convention on the future of Europe, who established the draft treaty for the Constitution of Europe. From 1998 to 2004, he was a minister delegate with responsibility for European affairs, earlier a member of the Doubts Department General Council, and a member of the Cour de Compte, the Court of Audit in France. I believe, dear Commissioner, that there is no need to continue explaining why we are so impatient to listen to your speech. Before giving you the floor, however, let me just shortly emphasize how grateful I am to the Stiftung Mercator, who is making this series of speeches possible. And I am also grateful to Mrs. Gabriele Müller and the team of our Walter Hallstein Institute for having prepared this event so kindly and so effectively. And above all, let me thank you already now for answering our questions with your speech and subsequently during this discussion. Dear Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Professor, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here in the heart of Berlin and at such a prestigious institution of higher learning. I was here today for meetings, especially with Wolfgang Schäuble, Minister of Finance, whom I know well, as my counterpart before when I was Economy and Finance Minister of France, and that I see now almost every week when we have to discuss about the South. I'm sorry that I couldn't be in Berlin a few weeks ago, but it was precisely the day we decided an agreement with the Greek government on which I will come back. But for me, it's as well a pleasure and a duty to be here often, to come each month, I would say, in Berlin for meetings, for talks, because of course this country is the most powerful economically, is very strong politically, and is a key player in the European game. I would like to thank you, Professor Pronis and the Walter Hallstein Institute for European Constitutional Law for the invitation for this distinguished event series. Wilhelm von Humboldt was an ardent advocate of science and enlightenment. And I don't know if everybody knows here, he wrote a short treatise on government in the spring of 1792. In one passage, he remarked that during the past year, 1791, Europe had, quote him, enjoyed the fruits of peace, but not a spirit of peacefulness. Only 1 month later, war broke out again in Europe, as it would on too many occasions in the following centuries, with, of course, higher and more dramatic circumstances. It is tempting to conclude today that the continent has forever surpassed a long era of conflict. But it's not far from where we're right now. We know that remainders of the wall that once divided Germany and Europe serve as a stark reminder that peace and unity in Europe are not inevitable byproducts of the passage of time. And I could also speak about Ukraine. I will come back on that. Peace and unity in Europe are the results of conscious and concrete political efforts, many of them recent in an historical perspective, which need to be maintained, but not only maintained, also intensified if we want to assure a secure and prosperous future. This is why I would like to take the opportunity tonight to explain our concrete efforts to support the economic recovery, the creation of jobs, to achieve broadly shared prosperity for the citizens of Europe. The stakes of these efforts go well beyond economics, however. This is why I also added the political challenges which are ahead of us, because economy and politics are clearly interlinked. After years of a prolonged crisis, the voices of populism and extremism have become louder, I would say, in many parts of our continent. In fact, in all parts of our continent, even if they are less visible here than they are, for example, in my home country, France. Fueled by frustration about their economic situation, by doubts about their future, some Europeans withdraw from the political process, or they quit the traditional party politics. There is a real risk today that citizens and member states will fall back into negative stereotypes about each other and turn inward for solutions. Here in Germany, the effects of the crisis are less pronounced and less visible than elsewhere. You talked about the outstanding performance of the German economy, and that's true. Employment is at historically high levels. The last years have seen decent wage growth. Youth unemployment is, compared to other countries, relatively low, in part thanks to an effective dual education and vocational training system. But you, Germans, must be conscious that across Europe, citizens face tremendous economic insecurity. Today, about 24 million people are unemployed in the European Union. And this is only the registered one, probably much more than that. 7 million of them have been without work for 2 years or more. Imagine what it represents. For young Europeans, the slow speed of the recovery has been especially disappointing. Over 20% of Europe's young people are looking for a job. You were talking about Greece. Of course, I will come back on it. It's more than 50% in Greece of young people who never considered that they have a future. How can they be happy with Europe as it is? We must understand that. This deprivation of professional experience and opportunity will make itself felt in their careers for decades to come. Decades. It will be there in their minds forever. So, if we fail to deliver significant economic improvement, we stand to lose the support of a whole generation of young Europeans. This is why this Commission, I'm very proud to be now part of it after a long now political career, serving as well my country and Europe. This Commission calls it itself the Commission of the last chance, not because of some megalomania, but just because we are truly convinced that if nothing happens in the 5 years to come, then the European project will be truly in danger, threatened by populism, threatened by rejection, threatened by the disappointment, especially of the young people in Europe. I have no doubt that the consequences of that would be calamitous. So I will start by the crisis and the beginning of the recovery, because there are also signs of relative optimism today. Before the crisis, European households and governments took on unsustainable amounts of debt for about a decade. Private credit boomed in many member states, often It flowed not only productive investment, but into the housing market, spurring construction, raising wages. Employment boost driven by credit concealed that structural challenges, many of them long-standing, were becoming more important, and that competitiveness eroded all around the continent. Maybe not in Germany, but really it's isolated there. At the same time, interest rates for sovereign debt were low, inciting governments across Europe to use debt instead of tax revenues to finance their outlays. While seemingly sustainable in good times, this debt became an unbearable burden when the global economic downturn struck. After asset prices tanked, households and private businesses were excessively indebted. And with tax receipts evaporating, expenditures ballooning, and capital markets deeply strained, investors began to worry about the risk inherent in sovereign debt. This is a vicious circle between private debt and sovereign debt. Against the backdrop of these worries and the market developments they entailed, fiscal policy, which could have otherwise helped cushion the crisis shock, was under consolidation pressure. It was not possible to have more debt. If you compare the level of debt today to what it was in 2008, it's 30% over, 30%. And with that, it's not possible to have a fiscal, not consolidation, but on the contrary, development. As banks repaired their balance sheets by deleveraging and cutting loan activities, fiscal consolidation weighed on growth and employment. It's clear, if you look at the macroeconomic figures, that for the last years, the contribution to fiscal consolidation to growth was negative or recessive, as ever you want. As a consequence of these different factors, while unemployment in the United States has declined slowly but steadily since the crisis, Europe went into a second recession and continued losing jobs, especially in construction and industry. It is in this context that Euro area member states stepped in to help the most hard-hit economies. This is the program logic. There were programs of, as well, the EU, the IMF, designed for Greece, still, for Ireland, for Portugal, for Spain, for Cyprus, who had lost access to debt markets or needed support for their banking sector in order to give them the necessary time to adjust and to stabilize their economies. These interventions have, on the whole, been successful, but also with consequences. The programs in Ireland, in Spain, in Portugal have been concluded now. These countries have made considerable reform progress and are able to borrow on the markets again, even at record low rates. Cyprus, I would say, is today on the right track as well. In Greece, the new government has committed to a continuation of reforms while respecting fiscal commitments. We'll see, and we'll have to ensure that this is true. Important advances to prevent crisis and to reduce the consequences have also been made at the European level over the past few years. I would mention first the European Banking Union, which promotes a healthy and robust financial sector. We can say that today we have the tools to address, I would say, a financial crisis as that one which struck the continent in 2008. We also created a particular mechanism, the European Stability Mechanism, which safeguards member states in financial distress. This is why we can say that the situation today, for example with Greece, is not the same as it was 2 years ago. The risks of contagion are much lower, and the capacity to respond to shocks is much stronger. And the overall health of our banks and our economic system is much better today. Still, we must not ignore the long-term economic and social implications of the crisis. They are hard to overstate. Many countries have experienced little or no growth, not just over a few years, but over the past decade. In 2014, we saw the beginning of a fragile and uneven recovery. which is confirmed in 2015. In the short term, I would say several factors points to an acceleration of this positive trend. First, the drastic decrease in the price of oil. It's supporting the recovery. Second, decisive monetary policy steps taken by the European central banks. I know that here in Germany there are discussions sometimes about that. I never discuss the independence of the central bank. But I think that truly the decisions made by Mr. Draghi and his team help to combat deflationary tendencies which would cause a major risk to the economic rebound. I can discuss that, of course. Third, and it's linked to the previous, the sustained depreciation of the euro enhances the competitiveness of producers in the Eurozone, boosting export. Again, in Germany, you can have another view because the German industry is so strong. But if I look at the industry in France, for example, a country I know well, of course, the industry is boosted by a depreciation of the euro. As a result, I would say the short-term economic outlook is improving. The European Commission currently expects economic growth to reach 1.7% in the EU and 1.3% in the Eurozone in 2015, followed by further increases in 2016. And 2015 will be the first year since the crisis where all the member states of the EU will have a positive growth. Not a tremendous one, I told you the figures, but positive. However, if not supported by further policy changes that enable long-term prosperity, this growth impulse risks being of a fragile and temporary nature, given tremendous reform needs, low investment, uneven fiscal consolidation successes. So this is, I would say, the picture. Now, what is the paradox, in my view, of the continuing European integration? Ladies and gentlemen, Europe faces momentous political challenges, both externally and internally, enormous challenges. Externally, the events of the past year have demonstrated that our values and the international security order we are embedded in are under pressure from different sides. I will just mention that. In Ukraine, nearby us, people are losing their lives in conflict after demanding a political reorientation of their country. There is war in Europe today, a true war. The situation there demands that we do everything we can to avoid further conflict and to stabilize the Ukrainian economy. But it also shows that we cannot take national sovereignty for granted on our own continent, and that the need to defend our values is not a thing of the past. In North Africa, instability and economic deprivation play into the hands of reckless human traffickers whose activities risk people's lives in the Mediterranean. In Syria and in Iraq, the terrorist group ISIS is spreading terror and death among people of all faces. Its agents, I must say here, are not religious leaders, but they are terrorists seeking religious legitimacy, which is not at all the same thing. And their attacks are directed not only or primarily against our values and history, but against that of any civilized people. The shocking, more than shocking, atrocious attacks in Paris and Copenhagen have shown the terrorist threat to our values and security remains acute, if not dramatic. All of these challenges concern the European Union as a whole, and they demand determined European responses. Meanwhile, this is for the external threats. Internally, relations between member states have at times become, I would say, more tense. Trust between key stakeholders is waning, particularly in the area of economic policy. And there is a real danger falling back into the trap of old stereotypes. Two developments there can play a role important in this context. First, I would say that the economic crisis has introduced an element of asymmetry between member states. While member states participate in a union of equals, there is a new concept, the concept of debtor countries and creditor countries that have complicated matters. They tend to stigmatize some populations, to provide fertile breeding ground for populist simplification and make collaboration more difficult. I don't like the idea that there would be a debtor and creditor union or southern and northern union. Such divide is counterproductive. Second, and more fundamentally, the crisis has called into question the European promise of welfare gains and economic convergence. The legitimacy of European integration, besides our commonly held values and the protection from foreign threats, has also hinged on the promise that citizens stand to benefit economically from the process. The European Union is generating now more economic benefits to European citizens than at any other point in history, but we ignore that. It's easy to gloss over these advantages and take them for granted. Against the background of difficulty, yes, indispensable adjustment needs, some erroneously depict Europe as offering not benefits and welfare gains, but budget cuts and sacrifices. The populists feed themselves from that. And the populist movement today can be extreme right or extreme left, but it has a common enemy, the euro, and moreover, the European Union. The conjunction of these dynamics within and between member states give rise to a kind of curious paradox. While more Europe is sorely needed, the readiness to take additional steps towards a more viable political union is faltering. The integration process, I would say, is somehow blocked today. We would need more integrated capital markets to share risk. We need that. But it is a challenge to overcome inertia and skepticism. This Commission wants to attack that. We would need to agree on fairer rules for the taxation on corporate profits. But it's not easy to overcome the unanimity rule and to find consensus on the form that this could take. This Commission, and especially me, is fighting against that. We would need deeper fiscal consolidation, coordination to absorb economic shocks. But worries about fiscal sovereignty make the matters very complex. This Commission needs to attack that. We should need a European defense force to effectively dissuade potential threats and to realize economies of scale. But we know that traditions and a lack of boldness hold our process back. Overcoming this situation will require resolve and trust. We need resolve because it is of the essence to realize that the cost of doing nothing now would be exorbitant. With external challenges looming, downside risks to our economies remaining important, monetary union not fully achieved, we cannot waver in our commitment to strive for deeper integration and to build a more stable union. We need also trust and not only resolve, because it is the fundamental condition for effectively advancing our common goals. And there I must insist on the role of key players, which are Germany, France, but also the Commission. I think the three of them have a crucial role to play in this context. Well, because the historical friendship between Germany and France has for decades been and remains until today an essential driver of the European project. And I would like really to salute the latest joint efforts by Chancellor Merkel and President Hollande to bring the adverse parties from Kiev and Moscow back to the negotiation table in Minsk. This is a testimony of this need for a Franco-German engine which is strong and positive. Yet, in the area of economics and public finance, the mutual perception is too often colored by misconceptions and stereotypes. Many Frenchmen admire Germany for its economic strengths, the quality of its engineers, but many also express frustration about Germany not doing enough to stimulate growth in the whole Eurozone. On the other side of the Rhine, many Germans see France as unable to reform, as a country socialist by nature. As a social democrat, I can assure you that's not true. This is not a good basis for trust-based cooperation and effective financial and economic policy coordination in EU. France can, and indeed should, be able to talk to each other with frankness. That's what I did this morning with my friend, Wolfgang Schäuble, the Minister of Finance here. But they must do so with respect and not with a condescending or patronizing manner. This is not the case with Wolfgang, of course. But sometimes when I read the press here, I feel the impression that, well, the image of France has gone down in Germany. And sometimes I'm also disappointed to read the French press and what's said on Germany. Each time there is a bad word in France on Germany, it's bad for the European project. Each time there is a bad word on France in Germany, it's also damaging to the European project. We must absolutely stick to this friendship with trust. Trust. The Commission then. The Commission, I'm a new member of the Commission after being for 7 years a member of the Council and for 6 years a member of the European Parliament, so I know all the institutions now. The Commission has a central role to play in building trust by bringing evidence and analytical objectivity to the table. Allow me to add a word on a fourth player, which is the European Central Bank. The ECB, I know, is criticized sometimes, but my deep conviction is that it acts in full independence, of course, and I will not comment on the substance of its monetary policy decisions, but I'm concerned to see to what extent public discourse about monetary policy is sometimes couched in terms of national interest. And globally, I would say that this leader of the ECB, who is Mario Draghi, acts in the general interest of Europe. Let me stress that throughout the crisis, the ECB has taken important decisions in the interest of the euro area as a whole and within its mandate, never outside. So this is the case also for the recent launch of the public sector purchase program. We need a supportive and accommodating monetary policy when inflation is too low, when deflation is threatening, and when growth and employment are weak. And that's exactly what is done now. But let me clear that I agree with Mario Draghi when he says that monetary policy cannot fix structural weaknesses. This is why we must continue to advance reforms in Europe, some of which have been long overdue. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now move, and it will be the last part of my speech, on the economic policy agenda. The new Commission has taken office 5 months ago. Short. It has taken office in difficult times, but it has also taken office with a clear and straightforward agenda. As President Juncker has made clear, our number one priority and the connecting thread running through each and every proposal will be getting Europe growing again and getting back people to work. Everything we do is guided by that. In the short term, our actions are guided by the three-pillar approach. 1, investments, 2, reforms, and 3, fiscal responsibility. First, we will invest to support the nascent economic recovery in Europe. Of course, we know that economic conditions are highly heterogeneous across the European Union. But as a whole, we identified, I would say, an investment gap. Today, the figures are such that Europe invests 20% less than before 2008. If it would continue, we would be, in 10 years from now, a second-ranked player in the economic competition. And so this is why we launched an investment plan for Europe, presented by President Juncker, which is designed to mobilize investments of over 315 billion euros to support the recovery. It consists of 3 elements: a financing strand with a new European Fund for Strategic Investment, an information strand with the establishment of a transparent project pipeline, and a regulatory strand to make Europe more attractive to investment. Let's make it clear, improving the internal market. And the proposed measures, I think, should significantly boost the EU's GDP over the next 3 years and create jobs. The estimations move from 1.3 million to 2.1 million in 2 years. I spoke about unemployment. It's not considerable, but it's not neglectable either. It's important to have additional investment. Reforms constitute the second pillar. We will continue to vigorously support reform efforts that need to be undertaken by member states. to improve regulatory policies, to facilitate investment, job creation, and unlock our long-term growth potential. Ambitious implementation of labor market reforms across all member states will not only help increase productivity, but also ensure that employment can rebound more quickly as the business cycle advances. And, for example, successful reforms in Portugal and Spain, I mentioned before, are testimony to this. And so the Commission supports reforms by offering advices and incentives to member states. This is the purpose of what we call the European semester. I want to underline that the goal of structural reforms is to make sure that the recovery results in employment growth and prosperity is broadly shared. It's not a punishment reform. It's something which makes progress. The third pillar is, I would say, more classical, is fiscal responsibility. Following years of very serious efforts to restore control of public finances, we need to remain unwavering in our commitment to fiscal prudence, I would say. If we are to avoid the mistakes of the past, deficit and debt levels need to be maintained at a sustainable path. But we changed a bit. We changed because the current aggregate fiscal stance in the Eurozone is broadly neutral. I said it was recessive before. We changed because we introduced some part of flexibility inside the Stability and Growth Pact. And so we also changed because we don't consider all member states in the same position. Some member states need to increase their efforts as fiscal consolidation. Some others, well, have room to do more in investment. You understand that I mentioned, for example, France, and also spoke a bit about Germany. And I think that we need to have that coordinated approach. And this is why we took decisions recently, as well encouraging France to reform more, encouraging France to reduce its deficit from 2015, and also suggesting to Germany to make higher investments. And I spoke this morning about that with Wolfgang Schäuble, because there is a positive effort in that direction with 15 billion euros. Together, these three pillars will ensure that the risk of stagnation is avoided and that the benefits of the recovery are broadly shared. I didn't speak much about Greece, but I want to say a word there. Of course, there were elections in Greece with a new government, I would say also of a new kind. I'm not talking like Steven Spielberg, it's not a new experience of the third type, it's different. This government is not conservative and it's not social democrat. It's not liberal, it's something else. Well, we are democracies. Europe is a union of democracies. And when a country votes for a new kind of party, when people ask for a change, there must be change. It's impossible when there are elections to tell the people, okay, you voted, but nothing happens. This would be a denial of democracy. So we need to respect what the voters chose, absolutely. And there are needs for change. If there is, you talked about poverty in Greece, unacceptable. You talked about humanitarian crisis or social crisis. It has to be dealt with. You spoke about tax evasion and the fact that there is no tax administration. We need to build that. You spoke also about inequalities that are not acceptable. So there is a need for true change, but there is also a need from the Greek government to respect its commitments towards its partner. And these commitments are financial. A debt has to be repaid, that's clear. A debt cannot be wiped out. There will be no haircut, no debt relief. We have to deal with the situation, economic and social situation in Greece. But they also need to make reform, because what Greece needs most is to have a competitive economy capable of creating growth and jobs. If not, the rest is just pure story. So we are now, I would say, in a learning process. We didn't know each other. We didn't know that kind of government. They didn't know what Europe was about. Now, I would say 5 weeks after, we start knowing each other. We are building common methods. People are now in Athens trying to find facts, and there is a negotiation group in Brussels. But we need to build trust, and that's not yet here. We need to reinforce that. We need to work a lot, and we have no time to lose. because, well, there are financial needs, because there are political needs, because there are social needs, because the program is running, because we need to build a new one. And there we are. The Commission there wants to play its role, as I would say, an honest broker capable of bringing people together and building solutions. It's not easy. But you must be sure that what we want to avoid is any kind of Grexit. We can discuss that, but I think that Greece in the Eurozone must be our common goal, a strong Greece in the Eurozone. We must avoid that, not at any condition, but with conditions, but we must avoid that, absolutely. I'm personally convinced that if Greece would go out of the Eurozone, the question would be, who's next? Today, the Eurozone is more than a fixed rate mechanism. It's something different. It's a monetary union. And if somebody leaves a union, it's no more a union, it's something else. So we have a problem there. Ladies and gentlemen, I will conclude by saying that this Commission, as I said, is the Commission of the last chance. I want to bring this address to a close by expressing my belief that Europe can and will emerge strengthened from this recovery. Together we will, we should, we want to put the right measures in place to support the economic rebound and regain our prosperity. And we will do so on the basis of a strong political consensus. Building political consensus across Europe is always challenging, and it will continue to be. The European Union doesn't grow closer automatically, we know that. Walter Einstein, everybody knows here, was the first president of the European Commission. You know, when I'm here at the Parliament, when I enter the college, there are pictures. You see the first commission with 6 people, 6 men, of course, some age. And then it grows, and now we are 28 with 9 women. We need to have more. But Walter Einstein once remarked, the essence of politics is choice. For this reason, I should not like to leave the impression that because the logic of economic integration is compelling and inexorable, its consequences can be put into practice without making a political choice and a number of difficult political decisions. Such choice and such decisions were needed for the process of European integration to begin. In order that it may continue, they are needed at every step of the way, choice and decisions. The size of the Commission changed, the problem changed, the nature of European integration changed. Of course, we are much more integrated than in those times, but we still need to have choice and decisions. Many of you in this room were born after the fall of the Berlin Wall. For people of our generation, it's something different. It was something unimaginable and which, well, created a totally new phase. You have witnessed a period of peace and continuous European integration. I would like to invite you to remember that this achievement is neither obvious nor spontaneous, and to use your ideas, fresh ideas, energy to contribute to our common project, and with what's rest of our energy we will also. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, dear Commissioner Moscovici. You show a great commitment. And if you say that this Commission considers itself sort of a commission of the last chance, of course, that also creates a risk. It seems very realistic, but it's very courageous also to call oneself the last chance. I hope it is a real chance. We have now time for discussion and your questions. And just to start with a question, if you have none so immediately, I just would like to have your view on a question which I asked myself since the German Bundestag discussed the first Greek umbrella, first measures in 2010, the question was raised to the economists: how high must be the growth of Greece in order to pay back the debts? Then they talked about, well, some 12% growth. Of course, everybody knew that this is not really realistic. But as you repeated now, let's say the requirement that debts have to be paid back. I asked myself, in a competitive European Union, however can it be possible that Greece becomes so performing and so strong in economic terms that there is some hope that it can pay back the money? I mean, there are many methods to get more time to refinance debts from today to tomorrow, but this is for me a really difficult open question.
Of course, if we would say it's a short term to reimburse debt, we would have the need for growth levels which are not existing in any period of history. Even the 30 famous years when the growth was 5 to 6% were not by definition 12 or 13%. So it's a matter of time. And the agreement we signed in November 2012 was for 2030. What's the point? I think that first, Greece needs growth, not to reimburse its debt, but just to create a competitive economy and to give work to the people in Greece. And that's what we must be worried about first, because Greece is a member of the European Union and of the Eurozone. And because the Greek people suffered so much, made so many efforts and sacrifices, because it's true that there is poverty in the streets in Greece. Your colleague is absolutely right. It's true that the people don't have electricity. It's true that some very rich people get richer during the crisis while the poor people became poorer. And this is why, finally, there was a change in politics. I don't advocate for Syriza. I never was, no, never. In my young term, I would have been maybe an extreme left voter, but not for a long time. I'm a decent social democrat now for more than 30 years. But, well, it was a rejection of the traditional parties and also a sanction for this poverty. This has to be addressed. And growth is necessary. You need to have investments in Greece. Private investments too, sorry to say that. You need to have good conditions in order for the tourist to go in Greece. And this is why I think the euro is more secure than anything, more than the drachma, of course, for example. So this is about growth. No, and the second point is that you need to have primary surpluses in order to start having the curve of the debt to be reversed. And this will be a part of the discussion, obviously. Then there will be, I imagine, discussions about not only the idea of a haircut. This is not acceptable for anybody, but maybe how time can be managed. We'll see that later on. For the time being, the priority is to make reforms in order to have a stronger economy, in order to be capable of concluding this program and to move to further arrangements. And there the key word is reforms. It's not reform is not a punishment, but if this economic system does not become strong and viable, the rest, well, is abstract, and everybody must be conscious of that.
I see now.
Before Syriza came to power, our forecast was about 3% of growth for this year. That's decent, but the level, starting level, is weak. So that's the minimum. I'm afraid we are not there now anymore. And we must restore the conditions for confidence for investors and for people in order to have the chance to have some growth in Greece this year and more growth on the years to come.
Yes, that's very, very stimulating and interesting. Please.
Dear Commissioner, thank you very much for the interesting speech. I have two questions. The first one, it is worse to be a member of the Eurogroup in regarding of Iceland. I understand that Iceland never won't be a member of the Eurogroup. And in this connection, what do you think about how big is the percentage that in next year Greece will be a member of the Eurogroup? Maybe it's a question you can't answer, but by my personal feeling, I hear so much about Brexit and all the points, and I'm not sure this could be a political solution can be possible. This is the first task. Another thing, you will be a member of the changing for the Lisbon Treaty, or from the Constitution to the Lisbon Treaty. It was a long way. Now we hear some voices from Great Britain that they want to make a revision of the treaty because of national interest. And if the revision would be not possible, they told, okay, we are interested in withdrawal of the European Union. What do you think about this tendency to overweight national policy in regarding of the whole house, of the big house of Europe?
The problem with Iceland is not that it's not a member of the Eurogroup, it's that there was a candidacy to join the European Union, and that finally it seems that this candidacy is no more on the table, although the door is open if they want to come back once. It was also the case for Norway a few years ago. It was the case for Switzerland. But we must, even if some countries withdraw their own candidacy, we must remain an inclusive body. And the door is still open. For Switzerland, for example, you mentioned Switzerland, well, the integration is strong with Schengen, with the internal market, but without the institutions. About Greece, again, I'm not a commentator or a bettor. I'm an actor. And the actor that I am, political actor, doesn't want Greece to get out. And will make its best effort to have Greece in good conditions, meaning also reforming and fulfilling its own commitments. For the second question about Great Britain, I was a member of the European Convention. It was in 2003, as a matter of fact, and represented the French government. And then there was a treaty, a project treaty adopted by this convention, which was the most ambitious ever. It was called the Constitutional Treaty. And then we moved to referendums in two countries, in France and in the Netherlands, two founding countries of the European Union, two theoretically very pro-European countries. And the result was no. 3 days in a row, first in France, then in the Netherlands. And so this treaty was rejected. And by other means was built. Sarkozy was president of France at the moment, but Merkel was yet a chancellor of Germany, what was called a mini-treaty, the Treaty of Lisbon, which is a lot like the Constitutional Treaty, except on the economic and social sides, where nothing's on. It's very difficult to change treaties in Europe, very difficult. It's also very difficult to win a referendum on Europe. And so what I tell my British friends, be cautious with that. Don't tempt the devil. And personally, if I would be British and pro-European, I would tend to avoid such temptation. But I'm not British, I'm pro-European, and there will be elections in a few weeks, and we'll see what happens. Of course, Great Britain is a special member of Europe because they have some exemptions for disciplines. They're not part of Schengen, for example. They're not part of the euro. But it's difficult for Europe to change itself just to keep Great Britain in. There are some things that can be done, but the fundamental logic of the treaties cannot be changed, obviously. So we'll see what happens. First, let's also have the people say their thought about elections, but I don't like referendums on Europe. If I'm pro-European. If I'm anti, well, I like it. I mean, You cannot have the definition that we say referendum on Europe. You could say like Flaubert, you know, so on the common ideas. You ask the question, and whatever the question is, the answer is no. It tends to be no. Even the Maastricht Treaty in France was adopted by referendum, supported by all the political forces, by the Prime Minister, the President, etc., the leader of the opposition, 51 versus 49%. And the situation in the public opinion is much worse than it was in those days. And I don't think that I won't insult anybody by saying in Great Britain there is a wide range of Euroscepticism. So personally, I want Great Britain in the Union. I would be careful about all that stuff. But I'm speaking freely here.
Yeah, there are problems all sides. There's a young lady down in the back of the hall, further on. Yes? Yeah?
Mr. Moscovici, Mr. Tsipras suggested today that there could be some kind of political deal reached at the EU summit at the end of the week. Do you think that's realistic?
I don't know. I know that he wants that. I think any kind of deal, at whatever level, Eurogroup or European Council, relies on strong commitments by the Greek government. Must start by that. Commitments to reform, commitments to do what is in the common agreement that we signed in the 28th of February. That's the beginning of everything. But of course, I would like things to happen. I'm favorable to political agreement with Greece, but again, on conditions that are yet agreed together.
Yes, thank you. There's a question here, and then it's you, okay?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you if this commission of last resort, as you called it, will be perhaps the first real economic government of the European Union. If there's any chance to take a role of an EU economic government, of course it's a coordinating task. You have to bring together national policymakers, but what we definitely need is to address the problems that the EU has by having a more homogeneous approach towards economic policy problems. So does your commission have the ambition to become a kind of economic government?
I would first come back on your remark, Professor, about the commission of the last chance with risks. Of course there are risks, and it's because there are huge risks that we are the commission of the last chance. The risks were identified in the last European elections. The last European elections showed a tremendous rise of populist parties in European Parliament. Why is there a grand coalition in the European Parliament? Because there is no other majority now. It was not the case before. I've been twice a member of the European Parliament from 1994 to 1997, and then 2004 to 2007 when I was Vice President of the European Parliament. It was not the case. And it showed that the majority of pro-Europeans is considerably reduced. And we see that there is a wave there. And this wave is fed by insufficient deliveries on economic field. Why would people be pro-European if they think that Europe is a punishment, that Europe is a failure, that Europe doesn't deliver jobs and growth? I spoke about Greece. If I would be a young Greek, a man or woman of under 25 without any chance of a job, and will be told by people that those reforms are good for me, I wouldn't vote for that. Obviously, if I was a civil servant who lost his job, probably I wouldn't vote for that, etc. So we need to bring hope again. And without results, there will be no hope. And we need urgent results. That's why it must be during the 5 years to come. If it's not, I fear that the next European election will be the success of the anti-European forces, and that the whole process will be blocked. Of course, there will always be a slight majority of pro-Europeans, but the system won't be capable of functioning anymore. This is why it's because the risks are so high that we need to put all our energy in solutions and deliveries. then the Commission cannot be the economic government on its own. The Commission is a part of a system. You are here studying constitutional law. The European model is very specific. It's not something like Montesquieu said. You don't have a legislative body on one side and the executive body on the other side. Everything's confused. We need to work together. I think what must be strengthened is the governance of the Eurogroup. The Eurogroup is the meeting of those who share the euro together. We need to have a permanent chairman of the Eurogroup. We need to have permanent cooperation between the Euro MPs which share the euro. We need to have a European capacity. We need to have later on a budget for the Eurozone. What for? Solidarity, fighting unemployment, maybe infrastructures. We need to have more integration of the Eurozone. I'm truly convinced of that. And the Commission, of course, is the heart. It's not on itself the European government, it's a heart. The definition of the Commission is that it has the monopoly of the initiative. Everything starts with the Commission, but everything also ends with the Commission, because the Commission is also the executive and administrative body. But in between, the decision-making can be legitimate only if the European Parliament is on board and only if the Member States are on board. And we need to reinforce that at the level of the Eurogroup, because that's a place where there can be some integration further on in the years to come. So we must be ambitious, we must take our role for serious, but we must also be very respectful of our environment. The Commission for the people of Europe is something that seems to be outside, flying in the air. It cannot be a government on its own. It can be more and more like a government, but always in a system which brings together the nation states, the European Parliament, the national parliaments. And there we must be the driving engine. That's how I would define our role, and the honest broker who always tries to build compromise and to find solutions.
May I just add one concern I feel at this moment? If we talk about the Commission of Last Resort with all these ambitions, and you say that people might be disappointed because there's not enough new jobs and not enough growth, etc. Is it wise for the Commission to take this up as its responsibility? The EU has no capacities and no competence even for economic policies. So how could the EU then take it up and promise more jobs and all these things which only can be created really within the member states? You can initiate, stimulate, support, you can do many things and bring people together and be a forum of discussion and coordination, etc., as the Commission. But the EU, if the EU as such would take this responsibility, we are creating jobs, people will always be disappointed because the EU cannot do this.
The EU is not only the EU institutions.
Yeah.
The EU is
in the member states too.
Is as well the Commission, the European Parliament, but the Council, which represents the member states, and we must all work together. When the Commission calls itself the Commission of the Last Chance, it means that it has to take its responsibility, which is not only about coordination; it's about impulse. And we try to do so. When we put on the table the investment plan, we take our responsibility for impulse. When we decide that we introduce a part of flexibility into the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact, it's about impulse. When we try to find solutions for Greece, it's about impulse. When we take our decisions concerning fiscal consolidation on France, for example, I know it's disputed here. I've been in the German Bundestag, and some MPs called me there, telling, well, you're not respecting the pact, you're violating the pact. I had to explain why we are not violating the pact. We're not violating the pact. we are using it in a clever way. So this Commission is about impulse, that's clear. But we cannot do, that's why I made this answer, everything on our own. But if we are not in the front line, who will be? Nobody else. If there is no impulse, if there is no initiative, nothing will happen. But it's up to the member states, of course, to create at their own level the conditions for more growth and jobs.
Okay. Thank you very much. The lady, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Commissaire. My main language is French, but I'll try it in English. I have a question concerning the key players and the job creation and growth in the European Union. In the end of this year, you will have a conference in Paris about climate, and tout le monde parle du climat maintenant. I have a question about this climate conference, and could it not be that investors can be found to create a responsibility in the society for the problems of climate, in form to create jobs and to have a hope and a new narrative of Europe in this climate conference? And how can you organize une transition énergétique dans l'Europe? Merci beaucoup.
I'll be very careful about that because it's not my portfolio, and because it's also the main responsibility of the member states there. But it's true that this event, the COP21, will take place in France in November. It will be a huge event. I think that 20,000 people will participate, as well non-governmental organizations and states. The Commission, of course, will play its role. And everybody knows that this COP21 has to be a success. And my former colleague, Laurent Fabius, is totally involved in that. Maybe you can send him your ideas. The Commission there is a provider, I would say.
So, you should address also to Mr. Fabius, and he will be happy to have your ideas. Great. Any further question? If not, I have one now, if I may, to add. What is your experience with the European semester? Is it your field? Is it under your responsibility within the Commission? And if so, do the member states feel that as an intrusion into their national budgetary autonomy, or do they react with a lot of flexibility and understanding, and do they follow the recommendations of the Commission in this procedure of European semester in practice?
I would say it's a joint responsibility of Vice President Dombrovskis and myself, say byproduct of two of us, under his responsibility for the European semester. But of course, all decisions made by ECFIN are mine, so we have to co-produce that, and we'll cooperate well. There are things in the 2-pack and 6-pack which are well understood, even when they're criticized. I would say the fiscal side of the problem, because there are criteria. Whether you like it or not, you have to apply it. That's why, for example, the accusation made to the Commission to violate the rules is stupid. There is no way to do that. No way. The criteria are so precise and so fixed that, well, you have to do what you have to do. For the rest, structural reforms or country-specific recommendations, I would say that's newer and maybe somehow more subjective. But still, it's work in progress, and I wouldn't be pessimistic about that. I think that the ownership of the European semester is growing. For example, countries now are preparing their stability program and their national plan of reforms. They all have to deliver before the end of April, and that nourishes a process of discussion with us. We'll come back on it, and I'm quite confident that this will become more and more a part of the national policies, that it's not felt as a pure constraint, but as also shared goals. Mm-hmm. But we must always be aware that Europe, it must not be a punishment and a constraint, that Europe must be a hope, that Europe cannot define itself against its member states. I remember when I was nominated as a French Economy and Finance Minister, it was in May 2012. My first visit was here in Berlin for Wolfgang Schäuble. The first day I came in my office, it was Thursday, it was a religious day, and so nobody worked. I was alone in Bercy with my secretary, and she told me, you received a call from George Osborne. I told her, and she told me, should I call him back? I told her, no, I don't want to speak to the British minister first. Of course, the one I have to talk to is Wolfgang Schäuble. I phoned him myself, we don't know each other, blah, blah, blah. I want to meet you fast. And I came here on the Monday. And on Tuesday, I was in Brussels with the European Commission. France, Germany, the European Commission. For me, when it's simple, it works. We must have strong bases. And then I was with Olli Rehn, who was my predecessor, and he told me a whole list of reforms that should be done, pensions, some professions that need to be reformed, etc. And I told him, listen, Olli, I don't fully agree with you. We have shared goals, the ends are common, but the means have to be national. The role of the Commission is not to take the hand of government and tell him precisely what it has to do. Now I'm a commissioner. I think the same. I didn't change. And I don't want to do that. I think that if we, the Commission, we seem to know better than the national states what is the situation in that state. We seem to know everything. We interfere in everyday's life decisions. We will be hated. We will be rejected. No, the European semester is to share common goals, but also to leave room to national policies. And that's the way it must be done.
Yeah, good. There was this remark and recommendation that the commissioner who is responsible should come into the national parliament and explain to the budgetary committees their points of view, their recommendation, etc. Is that something you could consider in the future?
It's the third time I come to Berlin since I'm a commissioner, and I would like to come each month. I was supposed to come also last month, but I had to participate to a phone call on Greece, as you said, at the same time. So yes. I couldn't be in Berlin and deciding on what happened. But each time I come here, I go to the Bundestag. And I met people from the Finance Committee 2 months ago. And today I was with the European Committee in the Bundestag. And of course, we need to address the parliaments. I was in the French Parliament last week. I will be in the Portuguese Parliament by the end of the month. I was in a video conference with the Italian Senate Commission for Finance 4 days ago. It's very good to have that discussion because people understand better, and we must respect national parliaments. And national parliaments must really be on board of political life. So, yes. I know that was a more ambitious proposal by Wolfgang Schäuble. I will be careful about that. But I feel that, you asked me about the European government, that in the future there must be a European economic and finance minister. And I said, in a way, what Jean-Claude Juncker decided by nominating me as well, economy and finance, but also taxation and customs union, which was never done before, creates that. Because when you're in a national country, you work on expenses as well on revenues together. It's good to do so. But I'm sure that in the future, not for me, because, well, I'm there for 5 years, and as I said, institutional changes are complicated. I'm not sure, but I think that we need to have a permanent president of the Eurogroup, which needs to be at the same time a commissioner, such as we do for foreign policy. Madame Mogherini, she's at the same time commissioner, vice president of the commission, and also she chairs the External Affairs Council. That's how things should be done. It will be more simple, but it will be for later on, and for somebody else.
So we have plenty of questions for discussion for the future and plenty of hope for the good development. If there's no very pressing other question, then I think that we should now come to a conclusion, and I would like to thank you, dear Commissioner Pierre Moscovici, very much for your openness and your clear and very well engaged and very stimulating explanations. I hope that you will succeed in all these great ambitions to get the European economy moving and growing again, and so overcoming the crisis. We put our trust in you.
You're too kind, but thank you for welcoming me here. It was a good moment for me, and I will come back.
That's fine. So it's just what I wanted to say. So when you are doing all this work, do not forget us. And then, therefore, I wanted to give you a little medal from Meissen, which reminds Berlin and the university. And in order to show you how beautiful this university is, there are parts which are even more beautiful than this room. There is a little book I would like to give you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.